Brennan, hello.
Hello, hello.
Nice to have you with us, man. Super cool.
It's great to be here. Great to meet you.
Yeah, look, one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is to talk to new people. Well, two things. First of all, talk to the people I already know about things that we usually don't talk about. Because all of the time people are just talking about technology and engineering and this and that, which is cool and all, but like there's a human behind that, and we want to get to know those people, but also to talk to new and interesting people that I don't know, and you fall in the latter category. If people have been, lots of people recommending you should talk to Brennan, so I'm happy you're here.
Cool. Yeah, it's cool to be here. And I think the idea for the show is super cool.
Awesome. So look, because I don't know you, just a couple of questions, so I get to know you. First of all, where are you from today?
I live in Dayton, Ohio. I was born and raised here, lived here most of my life. It is the birthplace of the Wright brothers.
Oh, cool stuff. Is that why you fly? So one of the things in your profile is that you are also a amateur pilot, I presume? Or?
Yes. That's not why I'm a pilot, but I'm happy that being a pilot, I get to live here.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it must be super cool. Like a lot of things around you. They got museums and stuff like that. And
yep, there's the National Museum, or I forget the name, but it's the Air Force Museum. United States Air Force Museum is here in Dayton. It's really big. It's super cool. So if you're ever coming through, stop there and let me know you're in town, and I'll take you flying.
Oh, that would be amazing, man. And for how long have you been flying? Just so I know if I want to go flying with you.
Well, I think I might have flown out of the womb. I'm not sure.
Okay. Oh.
But I started training. I had my first flying lesson when I was 13. Really started training at 15. Got my license at 17.
And you're not 18, so it's been a while.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, I'm 34 now.
Awesome. Like on the younger side, I must add. I shave my head so nobody can tell, but how old I really am. You don't have that problem. At least it doesn't seem like you have that problem. But for some people like me, at some point, you really don't have a choice. I mean, it's either that or a couple of patches here and there, which looks even worse. And so look, you were born there in this town. Like today, you run a company, startup company called Flightcontrol. You want to tell us a little bit more about that as well?
Sure. So Flightcontrol is a platform as a service that deploys applications to your own AWS account. And because of that, it allows us to leapfrog traditional platforms on almost every metric. So for example, you get 2 to 6x faster builds than any other platform, 50 to 75% cheaper compute because you don't have the markup, and near perfect reliability because it's dedicated AWS infrastructure.
Awesome. Hope it's going well, man. Running a company is not easy. Yeah, I'm running my own as well. Thurso, we're doing super well, getting more and more users, but like it is an excruciating experience. And I'm hoping we can chat more today about some aspects of how your faith helps you or hopefully helps you with that. But
absolutely.
Were you so you were born in Ohio, in the birthplace of the Wright brothers, either their real birthplace or their birthplace as the figures that they became. And were you born in a religious family or not? Like, were you raised in that context or?
I was. Yeah, so my parents were and still are part of a church called the Old German Baptist Brethren Church, which is a mouthful, but basically a very conservative Anabaptist-based church that dresses like the Amish, but has cars and computers. And so very conservative in a lot of respects.
Is that still like a very tight community like the Amish, or do you just go live
anywhere? Like it is pretty, yeah. And there's definitely this sense of like they're the best church, and if you go somewhere else, maybe you're not still a believer. Like it's kind of gotten better because they had this split between the progressives, which are more reasonable, and the conservatives, which are not so reasonable. So
I'm sure
overall, it's better
though, right?
It's better now, at least on the one part, than it was in many respects.
Interesting. Like I know nothing about that. Sure, it will be interesting to learn more. I mean, I know the Amish, of course. Everybody knows the Amish because they're so popular in culture, right? And everybody knows, at least I know, how quick they are to build a barn, right? And something like
Yep.
that, because
Yep.
they do stuff like that. Did you do that as well as a kid, or?
Not building. So my dad was an electrical engineer. So which is kind of odd, for his generation in this church. Definitely a lot of trades. And yeah.
And you're no longer part of this church, as I
Wow.
understand. And
Correct.
in fact, I'm surprised by your response, because when we were chatting before the show, you mentioned that one of the things you wanted to talk about was your conversion story. So I thought you were like me, that was an atheist, didn't believe in anything. So how was it for you? Did you leave this church? Do you leave for another church, or you just left for like, I don't believe in anything now?
Sure. So I grew up in, going to church with Christian parents and whatnot. So I knew basically the gospel more or less. I knew that, like giving my life to the Lord was the right thing to do. And I think I always had the sense that I would do it at some point. And I think I really deep down, I had this heart to serve God, to know him. But the religion really kept me away, I think, because especially at the time, that church had a lot of extra biblical requirements for how you would live, how you would dress, all these things. And it was like and it's very different than the culture around you. So it's like, you have to dress like the Amish, right? So it's that kind of decision of like, it's not just, are you going to follow God? It's like, are you going to cut off part of who you are? Are you going to like be completely different than the people around you? And so that was the thing. But then there came a point where I just like when I was 19, one night I had this super strong sense of like, I need God. And I just like, I broke down, I was crying. I was like, God, I need you. And I was like, I didn't know what I was doing really, or whatever, but I was like, I surrendered, myself to God at that point. Woke up the next day and something felt different. I wasn't sure what, like, it's just something like my
And
heart
you were
had woken up a little bit.
you were still in that community at this time, 19.
In the
You're living in that
community, but not a part
dress,
of the church.
okay.
So
Is
you had
that
to-
even
you have to
possible? Because
choose.
I believe the
You have to
Amish, that would not even be possible, right?
Yeah, so it's a,
Yeah.
well, it depends on your parents. At least in the church that I was, grew up under. It was really up to your parents about how the children dressed, whether they would make you dress very conservatively or not. My parents, thankfully, were more on the progressive side. And so I didn't have to dress like that. And so, you don't join that church unless you specifically join it once you're of some, age where you're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to join.
Okay. So just so I understand, like you are, like your parents are in the church.
Correct.
You're all living in this community, but there is a process for you to like your baptism or first communion in the Catholic Church or something like that, in which you now become a part. But you're going to service, and you're part of that. You're just not a member officially of the church.
Exactly.
Right?
And you don't participate in like the communion services and some things like that. Yeah.
Okay. No. But please go on. I mean, you're 19 and
So,
then you
yeah.
have this. Yeah.
So, I had that night where I surrendered, my life to God. I was like, God, I need you. And woke up and just felt like my heart had like come alive a little bit. I didn't really notice anything else. But it was like, I'm definitely like ready to, or will be soon ready to be baptized with water baptism. And about a month later, I did that. And that was kind of a unique experience for me too. It was very impactful because immediately, like that first week after the water baptism, is like when, I don't know, maybe it's like when I got my conscience or something. I had some level of conscience, but like all of a sudden I had this hyper awareness of what sin was. Like if I would like look at a lady or something, to lust after her, like, which I would have done all the time prior to that, it was like, boom, like now I know like this is not right. And so there was something else spiritually, that happened at the water baptism that really like woke up my mind and heart to like what is righteousness.
Interesting. And one thing that comes to my mind immediately when you tell me a story like that is there anything that you developed in the sense of right and wrong that was not a part of the culture around you, like something like, for example, because you maybe didn't have the understanding that this lust was wrong, but you certainly have heard people telling you it was wrong before. Like you don't have this understanding, but you have the rational telling that, hey, look, I mean, just was there anything that you could remember that say, hey, look, nobody has ever told me this before. I had no idea. It's just not something that was discussed, but I could suddenly grasp that there's something wrong with this.
I mean, that thing I described, I don't know if anyone had necessarily said it in that way. Like maybe I had, but it had not connected. Like I didn't like, and so there was something that, connected head to heart at that point, I guess.
And why what do you attribute this to? So like you've been through this ritual, which baptism is a ritual, like water baptism, as you say, and then something changed within you right away. What in your mind, like what's going on in your mind as you see this develop?
At the time I was like, I think I felt like I got filled with the Holy Spirit, something like that at that point.
Right. Yeah. Which is obviously like what we believe happens, right? But just did you have this consciousness and this understanding that this is what's going on, or did you have to?
Yeah. It was definitely a of like, okay, like I'm. So, I think the actual conversion is like hard to understand. Like there's multiple things, the Bible talks about. There's like being born again. There's being filled with the Holy Spirit. There's being baptized with the Holy Spirit, and like. I think sometimes they happen all together. Sometimes they're separate. So it's a little bit hard, I think, to know exactly like what happens at each point. But.
Well, the reason I find that fascinating, and I think the reason I potentially misunderstood you at first, is that given my background, a conversion experience would be something like I believed something else before, or and now I came to realize that I was wrong, and I. But like you already, like you call this a conversion, even though you grew up in this community, right? In this church. So for you, why do you think why would you use the term conversion for this? This is what I'm going after, right?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
I guess I converted from living from myself and for myself to living from God and for God.
This is super interesting because look, one of the things, and I am Catholic today. I grew up in a country that is nominally Catholic, and at age 14, I just decided that none of that was real, and I will become a secular person, atheist, and yada yada yada, and I stay like that until 35, 36, something like that. I'm just terrible with dates, so sometimes I get and also off by one errors are always present in whatever you do. I saw yesterday, by the way, somebody on Twitter saying I will keep doing off by one errors until the day after my death, which is fantastically fun. But one of the things that a lot of people criticize Catholics for is just this idea that you guys are all doing that stuff, and it's not biblical, and it's this and it's that, and like and you pray to the saints, and you're not talking to God, and again, if I believe that today, I wouldn't be Catholic. So I don't think this is right, and I don't think this is true. However, growing up in a Catholic, nominally, I always say in a nominally Catholic country, I definitely believe that a lot of people who use the term Catholic to describe themselves are doing exactly that. so I grant that in the sense that, look, if I don't think this is something that is wrong with the Catholic Church, but there are a lot of people that are growing up in a Catholic culture and will come to identify with that culture, they are not following God at all. And I think, and this is why I'm not saying this is the case in this community, but this tends to happen exactly where you have something that is much more than a religion and becomes a community, right? Because at the end of the day, the countries that were historically Catholic, they become the country, like the culture in the country, right? Mm-hmm. So you grow up like that, you go to church, like the same way I take my kids to church, but for a lot of people, this is just something you do, right?
Yeah, it's like just something you kind of going through the motions versus really having a heart change and really like living this other reality internally. And
again, I hope this is not too personal, but where were your parents in that sense? Were they more like going with the motions as well, or do you think they were really true believers that try to instill this in you?
They were definitely true believers, like living from the heart. I think, so they've come a long ways now, like from where they were then. But like so many of us, like you only know what's around you, right? And so they were doing really good for the situation that they had. I think, yeah.
Awesome. And just goes to show that it is important. Like I try to instill this into my kids. Do you have kids, by the way, or just?
Don't. I have nephews and a niece.
You're 34, man. You have your whole life ahead of you. Just, but so that's fine. But I didn't have kids at 34. I think again, I'm completely terrible with dates, but I was 36, I think, when my first kid was born. And the birth of my child was related to some extent to what I call a conversion, coming out of atheism. It wasn't like an experience like people describe, but it was one of the many things that put me in this path. But so I always try to teach my kids, like, why are you doing the things you're doing? Why are we praying? Like, so we're praying this prayer that we pray every night. What do you think it means? But he's 5. It just it keeps changing the subject and moving and etc. But as your story shows, that's not enough. You still need, like, whatever your parents are, even if it's a cultural thing, you still need to have your own part of that journey, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you don't become a Christian by assimilation.
Man, that's a zinger. It is true. Like it's always and in every case a personal decision.
Yeah, and I'll even go further to say a follower of Jesus or a follower of the way. Like that is, the Bible doesn't even talk about the Christian term except very rarely. It mostly talks about disciples, followers of Jesus, followers of the way. And so I think there's also kind of one way to distinguish it there is people who just say they're Christian versus people who are truly like following Jesus.
Yeah, but also, why would the Bible use the term Christians? It wasn't a term that was used at the time, right?
Yeah, I think one place says something like they were first called Christians at Antioch.
Yeah, but so exactly, so like the gospel specifically would never use the term Christians because it just wasn't a thing, right? Just awesome. And you are still a part of this church then, because I thought again, conversion maybe means that you move to a different thing eventually.
So I joined that church, the German Baptist church. So it's German Baptist is kind of the short name, but they're actually related to the Brethren Church, like Church of the Brethren, if anyone knows about that. So anyways, I did join that church at the time when I was baptized at 19. But like quickly, I was like really kind of pushing all the boundaries and buttons because I was just like reading the Bible and I was seeing all these things that Jesus said that we should experience, and I wasn't seeing it around me. And so one of these, for example, Jesus said in Mark, at the end of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, that all these signs shall follow those who believe. And it talks a number of things like they shall cast out demons, they shall speak with new tongues, they'll lay hands on the sick and they will recover. And so there was this supernatural things that I was like, should be happening from Scripture, but I'm not seeing it in the church around me. And so that was kind of a process. Eventually left that church and when I was 23. So I was there for about
Okay.
4 years.
Interesting. Because so the reason you left the church, then, if I understood you correctly, is that you didn't see around you any indication that a supernatural realm, so to speak, was present in that environment, and you thought it could be, it should be.
So yes and no.
Is that
I
okay?
did see like God is here, and I see God
Okay.
moving into people's lives. In terms of like their attitudes and their behavior and things like I could so it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that there was no spirituality there, but there was a
Okay.
lot of other things like more on what people would call the charismatic side
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't see, and I was like I want this, like this is good, just living a good life, but like I want more, like I want everything that God has for me. And I see in scripture a lot of that is like these supernatural experiences, dreams, visions, prophecy, and so forth, that I was wanting.
Now, let me get spicy with this. And I actually have a story that is very similar to yours, but at the same time in a completely different way. But is it fair to say, again, forgive me my ignorance if not, but is it fair to say that this church that you are is still a Protestant church? Because Anabaptists are Protestants.
Honestly, I'm not sure if they would fit in the
Okay.
Protestant category or not. I would label them brethren.
Okay. But
I don't
are
know if that's
you,
under Protestant or not.
yeah. It's funny because for me as a Catholic, almost everybody else is Protestant, right? In a sense,
Okay.
like but you would consider yourself a Protestant today, a
Today I
yeah,
would say I'm non-denominational. So
non-denominational.
I don't affiliate with any certain
Yeah.
denomination or yeah.
Here's what I'm trying to get with this. Usually, and now let's stop talking in generality, specifically about you. But usually, people that come from a Protestant background, you believe that in sola scriptura, scripture is all that matters. That's all I need. And just everything is in here, and nothing else is that is outside here matters. At least not matters as much as what is in here. Why do you need to change church then? Don't you can't you just like read scripture at home and say like all those things that are supernatural are not happening? But is it not something that you have to do and to like why do you need to why do you feel the need to say like I have to go out of this church for those things that I want to see happening to happen?
So to clarify, I went from that church to another church. So I didn't leave the
Yeah,
church,
right. Sure, right. Okay.
but you
No,
become
but
some,
that's exactly my point. Why do you need to leave that church
yes.
specifically and to go to another church? If I understood that
Yeah.
that's what happened, but if everything is on in your relationship with God, right?
Yeah. So there's that is absolutely true. That the people around me don't like strictly limit how I can live and what I can
Mm-hmm.
do, with God, but also the influence is like pushing against that, and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
believe in that. And so, um, especially when you're at a place and you want to go to another place, it's really hard to get there when everyone around you doesn't believe in that. And there's
Mm-hmm.
no other inspiration or like being able to see others' experiences or talk to other people to like help, get help and mentorship. And so that's why I went to another church who was like experiencing these things, because then you get that positive influence around you that is like
Mm-hmm.
actually at a higher place than you are, and helps you get there much faster.
Yeah, so it's just you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people
Yeah.
that go
Yep.
in the same direction, right?
Yep.
And you are, I understand, are you an engineer by trade as well? Your father was an
Yeah. Yeah.
engineer
Yep.
and you're an engineer as well. So you've been through a scientific education like I did, like almost all of us did. And have you ever got this pushback during this education about, hey, the kind of influence that I eventually succumbed to, that like, this is just not real. All of that is just in your mind and you're smiling. So you did. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, in college, definitely, I remember, some of the classes like I don't know if it was some history and some psychology classes, those sort of things where it's like the professor is very anti Christianity or anti God, in some way. Um, and so there was definitely, I think, a time there where it pushed me to like, is this like really true? Like, is this
Hmm.
real? I definitely had to do some, because I'd had this experience, right? And I felt like this thing was right. But then like, as you're getting older out in the world and college, whatnot, your brain has to kind of catch up to that and figure out like,
Hmm.
why do I believe this? Is it something I can actually rely on?
Because you wouldn't deny, for example, that there are many things that we just come to believe that they are not true. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. You have
Yep.
like optical
Yep.
illusions and this and that, etc. So there are. By the way, I was reading like it's not my fault because at YouTube. Let me just enter here a little bit more. YouTube has the algorithm, and then they start like suggesting stuff to you that you don't necessarily want to see, but they end up watching, and some of that is actually great because it discover new things. But I've been suggested a bunch of times a couple of videos about UFOs, and which by the way, my stance on UFOs, we're not talking about UFOs here, but my stance on UFOs is that they are clearly real, but that doesn't mean they're aliens, right? This is the leap that is hard for me to make. I mean, it's definitely a phenomena there, but from there to like the only possible explanation is that they come from like another galaxy. Like there, I don't see any evidence for that. But this guy, what he was saying is that like, look, 99% of the phenomena is fake. And then he starts going into like what were the most common explanations. People just mistake the planet Venus very often, apparently, for UFOs, or sometimes it's just an experimental aircraft, and sometimes it's just this, sometimes it's just that. But there's this 1% of cases that just you can't like. There is no other possible explanation than there is something here that. Again, I'm not saying I don't actually believe they're aliens, but there's something here that just cannot be explained with the corpus of knowledge that we have today. But one thing that is very easy to do is look into this 99% and then infer from that all of the corpus is false. So not just because some of it is false, that means that everything is false. But how can you tell that the faith that you have today is this 1%? Is the thing that's true?
I think there are a few things that are very important that Scripture like hounds on. That is really core to the faith. Like Jesus is God. Jesus died on the cross for our atonement, for redemption. He rose from the dead, and that I'm saved by faith, not through grace, not by my own effort,
Mm-hmm.
and that true conversion will result in like a different walk. Like, so there should be some evidence of your faith. But beyond that, there's a lot of other sort of beliefs and teachings and practices that differ between churches.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the whether I think those things don't matter. Like you can practice that one way, you can practice it another.
Oh no, but I'm not talking too much between churches. I'm
Okay.
talking more like between, for example, you and your professor that is putting these things in your mind and say like it's just from your imagination and etc. How do you ground this and what was the process for you when you had those questions
Got it.
to really come to understand that yeah, Jesus really is God? Because if you have nothing to ground this on, that's just a book, right? Which is what your professor is trying to push on you,
Yeah.
whether or not they're saying it, right?
So I don't remember real clearly kind of the order of things and like what, how that actually played out. But I definitely read the book, The Case for Christ. Have you heard of this book?
I've heard of this book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think he used to be an atheist as well. And maybe a similar story to yourself where he was an investigative journalist, started looking into things, and eventually decided that the evidence, like the historical evidence and whatnot, led to like this is a truth. Like the things that the Bible says actually happened, And so that at least was one of the things that kind of helped shore up that, talking about the number of the manuscripts, that we have and that corroborate each other.
Look, I love that. I love that because the impression that I had of religious people, which is certainly the impression that your professor had, I'm safe to say, is that all of that is fantasy. And you choose to believe that for one reason or another, despite evidence. Like a lot of people define faith as, which is why like faith is criticized, because faith is believing in something despite evidence to the contrary. And I think this is ridiculous. I also, like, I agree that I don't have faith in that definition of faith. Faith requires a leap, right? You don't know everything, and you have to take a leap in some points, but it's not despite the evidence of anything, and it's just supported by some evidence, right?
Yeah, and the book the book of Hebrews in the Bible says that faith is the evidence of things not seen. Like it's literally like there is evidence that this thing exists, and that is why we have faith in it.
Yeah, no, it's a similar story for me. So the what happened to me is that after I became an atheist, for the first time, I became an atheist 2 times, and after I became an atheist for the first time, I had a couple of experiences, and I'll just say experiences for now, but and that led me to seek like New Age random spirituality thing, not Christian or anything like that. And it's just because, look, I don't think I can explain it now. And then it opened, and it also was very young. Keep in mind, it was like 16, 17. So I became an atheist for the first time at age 14. And then at 16, 17, I was like, oh, hold on. I think things seem to be more complex than I first imagined. And then I went into this like New Age thing, and again, not going into a lot of specifics here, but I was doing this thing in which you had like those mysteries that you had to be initiated into, and those are things that like take time because you need to get your grade 1 and grade 2 and etc. and like get initiated into those things. And I was coming with this attitude of, like, yeah, I mean, you're telling me this, I'll grant you, like, and I want to see where it goes. And then I got to like level 4 or whatever out of however many, and I started like going to a temple and being like initiated in secrets of this and that. And like over time, I was starting to think, yeah, I don't think none of that is actually real. And then we had this initiation thing that was one part of it that you did it at home, and then after you do it at home, well, like in solitude, just you and however name they had for God, which I forgot by now, but they all have this like your God of the. There's always like a fun name for God, and then after you do this thing by yourself, you go into this temple and have this ritual that is done in a group. So there was this thing that you had to pick a piece of paper, like you had to write like a 30, 40 words in a piece of paper, and then you put them all together, and then you pick 2 pieces of paper and with those words, and the paper you picked was telling you something about your personality, like a tarot card or something like that, and this will be like your official name in this thing. And then like I decided to just do it twice to see if I would pick the same piece of paper. Which I said, if I do it twice, do I pick the same piece of paper? Because I mean, you're saying that this thing that I'm doing like is guided by some spiritual thing, and it's defining of my personality, right? So if I pick like Valorant, and if it's because I am that, then I was guided to pick that. So if I pick it twice, do I pick the same word? And I did it, and I picked two completely different words. I mean, like completely different personality aspects and etc. Which is why I say, you know what? Like I'm not gonna even go bother. And this was like after 3 or 4 years or something like that. So like I tested it. I tested it, and I said, like, you're making a claim. You are making a claim. But then I went into like, okay, so then nothing else is true. Like I everything I tested so far is fake. So that's it. I'm going to be an atheist again. And then I stayed like that for decades.
Yeah, that's quite the journey.
Yeah. Tell me about a time in which you tested this, because you said, look, I'm sure you did, because you're telling me that you got out of this church because you were not experiencing the supernatural. So it's safe to assume that you found a place today where you do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. How did I kind of test this? I think it's kind of been more along the way, like not a one time event like that. But like one of the things is like, can a human like hear from God? Can God speak to a person and like tell you things that you could not know, any other way? And that's like the kind of thing that you see in the Bible. And it was like, I feel like, the Bible is saying that in through the Jesus and the apostles that we should be experiencing those things today. And I wasn't, but I was seeking that. And so I guess like the last part of my conversion story was, so it was, I surrendered my life to God. A month later, got water baptized. And then about 9 months later, I went to a Bible school. And it was a pretty like intense like biblical teaching. They had like a prayer session each day with a small group of other guys I was in. And it was there that I like really got free of, I guess, was it like lust and masturbation addiction. And somehow through that week, I believe I got baptized with the Holy Spirit. Like I left that week very different. Like literally I was like at a, like a 2, I don't know, energy and passion level for the Lord. And after that week, I was like at a 10, and I've like been at a 10 most of my life now. And so something like supernatural happened where, I was able to live in victory over sin and addictions and things. Like it was a definite amount of power that I had from that point on. And so that
did you have other addictions as well, or does?
No, it was mainly just the lust thing.
Yeah, no, it's great that you bring this up, because last week I had the Primogen on stream. I bet you.
I watched it. Yeah.
For people, as I said, I'm trying my best to actually reach people outside of tech as well. But for people in tech, the Primogen is obviously a very well-known figure. We had almost 3,000 people watching it live on Twitter. And he was telling us his story about like how he felt an addiction to porn. And this is mind-blowing to a lot of people, because a lot of people in the secular world don't see anything wrong with porn. And I was one of them. And in fact, it's just something that you do. It's not even considered, and not always it is an addiction. Not always it is an addiction, but it can be an addiction. And definitely, I personally also came to agree that it is just a net, if not fully bad, totally irredeemably bad, which probably is, at the very, very least, a net negative, because it puts you in a path where, like, if you're feeding that lust, your mind gets, more and more out there. And this can, affect the relationships that you have, can affect a lot. And things that become an addiction are very hard for you to break free of. I would say it might be impossible, if not through the grace of God. And the reason I asked this, if this was the only addiction that you had, is that I also saw myself breaking free of some addictions, but I had plenty. I believe I'm a person that I'm very prone to addictions, and some of them I'm still struggling, unfortunately. So there is a comment here from Jacob that plenty of secular women take issue with porn. Is mostly men that rationalize it to ourselves. So not, again, I think as long as you're using those terms of plenty and most, etc., you're right. But there are a lot of women as well that just go look at OnlyFans. That not only they don't have a problem with porn, they produce it, right?
There's a book I would highly recommend called Unwanted. And I think the tagline is something like how our sexual brokenness is the like the key to our healing. And it reminded me of
That's
this
very
because
Freudian. There's very Freudian, right?
so
In a sense.
it's
Yeah.
Christian, you know.
Okay.
And anyways, it talks about how pornography is like a key thing in our driving violence against women in our society. And it kind of goes into like some of those things, like why that is. And that is everyone I've recommended that book to and read it has like wrecked them because it just like uncovers stuff from your past. So I would highly recommend Unwanted.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying like I'm saying it's Freudian in the sense that this idea that your sexual desires are the root of Freud goes much further than that. Like, is essentially everything is about that, right? And, which I don't think is true, but a lot of it goes again in the 99 and the 1%. A lot of things that are broken about us definitely come from that.
Yeah.
And we live in the secular society that today that the mere mention of I desire this is enough to say then it's right and you must give life to this. But I mean, this puts you in a very confusing spiral because I do think that like the effect that I saw in my life with porn was exactly this. The more you consume it, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rene Girard and like the theory of mimetic desire and etc. Very TLDR of that is that like our like the most obvious and simple way to understand is that our desires are not ours. They are to some extent influenced by what we see around us and the human need to copy what other people are doing. So what tends to happen with porn is that like you start seeing this thing and those things are very unnatural. And then you want more of it, and then you get numb to that, and then you want more of it, and you're always trying to like capture. But yeah, like so Rene Girard has this idea that like you have your desires are not truly yours, so you end up humans naturally copy what we want. So it's an antidote to some extension that to the idea that whatever you're feeling must be the thing you act on. Right.
Yeah,
and it creates a spiral.
Yes. I think this relates to what I think is one of the most powerful things of the Christian faith is the new identity that you get, you know. And so I think we kind of start out in life, like we're the identity given by our parents, people around us. Eventually, I think we kind of take ownership of that and we're like, well, who am I? What kind of identity do I want to be? But the powerful thing with Christianity is that God gives us a new identity, and we get to live out of His identity. And the identity that He gives us is like the most pure identity possible. Like literally, Jesus. The Scripture says that I am complete in Jesus. I am whole. Like that is when we're born again, we become completely blameless, holy, pure, loved, valuable, like everything that's good, like to the max. Like that is who we are. And with Holy Spirit inside of us, we can start to live out of that. And identity-based change is like the most powerful change. And so, now, I'm walking around like believing that like literally I'm so valuable. I'm so loved. I am holy. I'm pure. And like that gives me the power to like live out this new set of values and to overcome like whatever temptations that come my way.
And it's funny because a lot of New Age is a shallow version of this, because you have those like self-help things that are just saying like, tell yourself, go in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself and tell yourself that you matter and etc. And you can do it, and it kind of doesn't work. And again, it doesn't work because you're just saying it. There's no substance, right? It's just the outer.
You have to actually believe it, and unless you're really good at convincing yourself, then you're not going to believe it.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're right. I do think, and I thought long and hard about this problem already, and the best answer I could get so far is that like for some reason God wants me to play this role, which I will happily do. But I'm not a very experiential person. I'm a very, very rational person. And I keep seeing people claiming in the podcast that you have to experience this. I mean, this has to happen, otherwise it's empty. And maybe the role that I'm here to play is to show you that nothing against the experience. That's great, but if you don't experience, if you're a person like me, there is also a way to get there. But you certainly have to believe it, and you cannot choose what you believe. Again, you definitely cannot choose what you believe. I think
you can choose what you want to believe, but you can't just like flip a switch to like change what your heart believes. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I don't think you can choose. I don't think you can choose what you want to believe. I mean, you can fool yourself. That's a different thing. You can outwardly say I believe this, but you don't. As I said, for me, the process, the TLDR of my process, is that looking into history through different means, like for whatever reasons, and I'm not going to go into much into why in the process, but I came to believe. I wasn't fooling myself. I mean, the conclusion of my study was that people who die tend to stay dead, but there was one exception, right? So I came to believe that through rational means, but I believe that, and until I believed this, anything else that I could do was shallow, right? Oh. And in fact, I had friends that said, "Look, you should join a church as a solution for a particular problem of a social malaise." And some people say that today, like, "Oh, it's the dating scene is broken. Now join a church because the people there are more conservative, etc." I refuse to. I told many friends the reason I'm not going to do this, even if I might even agree with you, that it might be a good idea. Like, I can't lie because I can. You can lie to other people, but I can't. I'm terrible at that. But at some level, you can't lie to yourself. I mean, you can try, but you don't. And like, I'm not just going through the motions. But look, through research, I came to understand that like people tend to stay dead after they died. I don't know of another case in which somebody just decided to rise up and come back, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I was super analytical too, like, back in my early 20s, like it was definitely like, I was not having experiences as well because I was so analytical. And I feel like my whole like faith journey is becoming less analytical and more like spiritual, if you will. Like, I'm still analytical, but like now it's like in balance.
Interesting. And you call it a journey. So what I take from this is two things. First of all, it wasn't immediate, and second of all, you're still going on. Yeah.
Yes.
So walk us through this. Like, so you are initially a super analytical person. Are there things that happen? And I'll be selfish here. I'm going to ask for myself, not for the audience. Like, if the audience derives value, great. Because this is a very hot button issue for me. So is this something that you, like, it's a collection of things that happen? Do you desire for this to happen? Then you seek it? And then what are the things that take you into this path?
So I definitely had the desire at the start. I was asking God for it. I was seeking for it. And I think the realm of experiences doesn't happen. It doesn't come about by understanding. It comes about by your heart. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. So I don't know how I kind of got past that. But definitely there was a desire. Let's see. Being around other people who were experiencing and living out like what I wanted was also huge. And also the in the church I grew up in, they really, unfortunately gave you this sense of fear about deception. And this, they really taught you that like, there's like only one truth. And like, if you get off that just a little bit, you might go to hell. And so a lot of that was just like opening up expanding my thinking to realizing that like I am God's, I'm safe. Like I can experiment, like I can try things, like as long as I stay true to seeking Jesus to, and the things that are in line with God's character, like God's not going to let me like fall off a cliff accidentally into hell. So, so this was helpful in kind of trying things.
This is really good because look, I had experiences in my new age phase because I've done a bunch of meditation, and then you do a lot of those practices, and this is actually why I think I lasted so long, because things do happen, and part of it because I think a lot of that actually is mechanical. I was interviewing somebody the other day that does a lot of that does a lot of Buddhist meditation. Although she's not Buddhist, I'm not sure if you caught that episode or not with Nadia. Great episode for the people in the audience. Go check that out. Nadia, she practices this Buddhist meditation. Although again, she is not Buddhist. But we were talking about meditation, like Sam Harris, which is a atheist that I used to. He does meditation too, and like you can alter those altered states of consciousness. And for Nadia, this was one experience that connected her to God, because she comes from this analytical background, and then like I'm having this like transcendental experiences. So there must be a God here to connect that. But if I may be honest, I think I am today. And again, I'm relatively recently converted. I do have a little bit of fear of like, should I be doing those things again? Because I have this thing that, yeah, when I was doing those things and doing those practices and doing things this way, I had all of those experiences, but this was also not Christian. It was just like something that I don't see the basis today.
Yes, I think, yeah, this is so interesting. So, I think God has created the world, the universe, the spiritual, the natural, everything. I also see it. I also see the physical and the what we call the supernatural as kind of like a continuous spectrum, just like the light spectrum. Where,
I agree.
Like, you know, you see things, and then there's things you don't see, but really it's just continuous spectrum. I think it's the same way with the physical and the supernatural. And so sometimes like we might call it supernatural or spiritual. Maybe it's not. I don't know, but I don't think that's super important. And so I think God created all these things. He created tools. He created ways, like other realms, like ways to experience things. And just because someone is doing something without Jesus, and maybe for selfish reasons, maybe whatever, does not mean that thing is bad. Like maybe like God created that thing actually for, to do in a right way, to be in a good way, in a pure way. And I think that the devil has not created anything. I think the devil only takes things that God has created and uses them for evil. And so I think there are a lot of like new age things that actually like new age has like taken from what God intended. And so
not only new age, I mean, even other more established religions, because we always have this issue, like Christians are sometimes accused of being like true exclusionists, because we do say that Jesus is the truth, life, and the way, and that's it, right? So is there anybody else wrong? But I don't think necessarily everybody else is wrong, exactly in the sense that there is I call it mechanical, but like there is a mechanical level to those experiences in which those things are true. They are not the fullness of the truth, but that doesn't make them false, and that doesn't mean like that those... at some point, I think they will eventually make claims that you cannot back up and conflict with some other things that we know to be true, and those claims are false, but does not mean that the entirety of that is false. Right?
Yes. Yep.
How far would you go with that experimentation, though? Would you? Quick parenthesis here. One of the reasons I started this podcast is that I would show up like this in someone else's podcast, and people would start calling me Joe Rogan for obvious reasons. And Joe Rogan also always talks about DMT. So just to play the part, I sometimes try to bring that into the conversation as well, to play to my Joe Roganish persona. Do you think that extends to DMT? Like, I'm assuming you know what that is, because when I talk to Kent did not know. So DMT is a substance. And there are two particular places in which I think it's present. One of them is LSD. And so people take that and have those experiences. And the most famous one is in ayahuasca, which is something DMT mentioned. There you go. But like there, I'll put the comment here. I'll read Jacob's other comments soon. But like some people go to those are like shamanic and rituals. So you take this substance, and that substance puts you in a altered state of consciousness. But here's the thing: people who take this, they come out of that experience reporting very similar things, and this is cross-cultural. And they come out of this experience relating that the beings and the entities that they see in those realms are real, in the sense that they seem to have a life on their own. If they do it multiple times, they sometimes meet the same entities, and time passed for them between those experiences.
Right.
And look, again, I'd never done anything like that. Maybe I would have in my New Age if I got across it, but I just didn't. And reading those experiences, I do believe it's real, in the sense that they are connecting with something real, in the sense that like they all report like very similar things, and those entities comes but also at the same time, a lot of Christians believe that this is, yes, it is real, but it's demonic, right? But I've also seen people who are Christians say, I tried, and like this brought me closer to Jesus. But I never know what to think of it, like of this part. What is your first intuition?
I think that there's absolutely other realms where there's literally beings. Like I think there's like the seven spirits of God. There's there's like the beings of wisdom, of prudence, of knowledge, and the scripture talks about. And so there's definitely other realms. I think that so I would try most things, but in this case, I think that this substance is a shortcut of going through Jesus, of pursuing God to access those realms. And I think I would consider it kind of like an illegal access.
Why illegal though? Because you just said before that like those things are not necessarily bad as long as the Lord is with you.
Maybe God will, yeah. So I'm saying this is it's just like what's coming to mind.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have a lot of reasoning behind it. Maybe God will teach me otherwise. But I have I've talked to God about this thing in other ways of like this spirituality stuff, of seeing other people who are not Christian, like doing these things. And I'm like, why are they able to access like this power that I thought that was like just for Christians, or, something weird, I don't know, like that. And yeah, I feel like what God was saying is that, yes, like this is a power, this is ability, this is realms that I've created. And I've designed it to be in a certain way, to be accessed in a certain way. Like in the garden, like, God put Adam and Eve in the garden, and he said, you can do all these things, just don't eat of this tree. Like there's things available to you, but it needs to be in a right way. And so I feel like this is kind of a shortcut to that. So I know people who are like access those realms because they have pursued God so much, and they don't have to take any substance. And it's like part of and it's very
absolutely.
But
absolutely. But yeah,
I don't know.
I'm definitely not making the claim that this is the way to have those experiences. Those experiences are obviously available without it. But for and I want to make it clear to anybody who's listening, I'm not saying that I'm going to do this, especially because my current belief is that this is probably not God's. You seem to disagree, which is why I'm going in that direction. You say, hey, this is like you say it's a shortcut to God. My current belief is that this is the opposite of God, which is.
Let me clarify. I wouldn't say it's a shortcut to God. It's a shortcut to an experience that God has created.
To an experience that God has created. Okay. Yeah, but like for a person like me that struggles very much with experientialism, like that is what in that context is that I think, and I found that you're interesting. You say like as long as you have God. Let me ask you a question, which look, it's something that I learned 2 months ago. And I'm still trying to come to terms with that. And I don't know how to fit this. If you close your eyes and you imagine an apple, do you see an apple?
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't. And I never did. And even though when I was doing like all those meditation things and etc., people always would say like visualize this, make sure that you really see, that you feel the texture.
Yeah.
I can't do none of that stuff. And 2 months ago, I came to know that this is actually a condition. It's called aphantasia.
Yep.
And apparently there's like 5%, it's not very common. There's like 5% of the population that you just don't have anything visual. Like I told that my wife 3 days ago, was telling her that, and she was like, how come you can't see an apple? Like just close your eyes and see an apple. Don't you dream? I said, I do dream, but like it's not a visual experience. Like it's almost like I know that the story happened and I know the color. If I think of an apple, I can describe an apple to you textually, but I can't see the damn apple, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I keep asking myself is that, look, the fact that I have such a hard time experiencing God could be just a part of who I am as a physical person, right? Just it could be. Because like I definitely have a lot of those things in which like that, in which I just don't experience the world in the same way as other people. Like, so the stuff about visualization, meditation, like colors and etc. is just not there for me. Right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, like imagination is a huge way that God speaks to me. Like I will see things.
This is blocked for me, right? To see.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. There's a comment here from Jacob. On the topic of experiential belief, I was a rationalist believer at first, and that was real belief. But there was still a magnitude of difference in my beliefs after I had my first experiences. Jacob, if you want to come on the podcast, send me a message. I would love to chat about it. As I'm describing, I can definitely relate to that.
How much longer do we have?
No, as long as you want, man. Like this is I've been booking like at least 2 hours, leaning onto my Joe Rogan persona because I want to have those deep conversations. That's what I want, right? And sometimes after an hour, there's nothing else to talk about. Sometimes the conversation keeps going, which are my favorites. So don't worry about it. If you do have to go, I'll let you go. But like, don't worry about it at all. One of the things that I wanted to explore is, how did that experience changed your professional life? Because some members of the audience were actually reaching out to me and say, "Hey, I would love to hear more from your guests about this specifically. You haven't been covering that much." So let's go there. I mean, do you see yourself as a different person professionally because of this?
Absolutely. Like I mean, it's so just on a personal level, but it obviously carries into professional. Is like I'm so much of a better person, more likable, more loving, more forgiving, more kind. Like everything that is good is because a result of my faith. And I think, sometimes people look at me and the things I do and whatever, and like, oh, this is a good person. And like, it did not start that way. It's because of God's change in my life, in my heart, of me choosing repeatedly over and over to seek God, to live out his truth, to live out what he says is righteousness, and to serve him and other people versus myself. And so that definitely also results in like more success and things in the marketplace.
There are times in the marketplace though the things get very cutthroat.
Yeah.
Right?
I can be cutthroat.
But can you be cutthroat and loving?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I do believe, yeah.
Like I'm pretty cutthroat with my competitors.
Okay.
But I view them as opponents to a game, not my enemy. So I'm not going to defame the founders of my competitors or whatever. Like I have a lot of respect and honor for them. At the same time, I'm going to be very ruthless, just like I would be playing a board game with my friends that I love and care for. Like I can play the game and be very competitive and also still like truly love and honor and care for the other person.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I happen to think that both stories and games are part of how this world works in a sense, right?
Yep.
So the reason one of the reasons Jesus had to come and die and do all of that is that we need stories. And we needed that one story that is true to ground ourselves with. But like we like the way we understand things is by telling stories, and games, playing games, if you think about it, is a way of telling a story, right? Because you can tell the story of Flightcontrol as a company that started like that and then did this other thing, and then those things mentioned. At the end of the day, you are constructing a story. And the world is, at the end of the day, just a bunch of those stories coming together, right? And telling themselves. So, and stories need the villain.
Yep.
Sometimes, right? Just it's interesting. It's interesting because look, there's let me preface by saying that I don't actually believe in any of that. But one of the things that atheists would say, and definitely one of the things that I said, is that look, it's a game. The Bible is a game of telephone. It's just that you say this one thing, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, Jesus existed, but none of those miracles ever happened. But as people tell the story keeps growing, growing, growing. Which it's funny because I used to believe that, and today I can't see how anybody would believe this because it's so obviously true. But one of the things that helped me understand that is that, in fact, this does happen. It does happen. Like you have those stories in which you have this mechanism in which things happen, and you exaggerate them as you tell the story. And it did happen to Christianity as well. If you see the gospel accounts that were written in the 2nd century, they are very fantastical in a lot of ways. So it helped me understand that, yeah, in fact, you are right. This process does happen, and it will be silly to say it doesn't happen because it happened anywhere else. But the thing about the gospel accounts that landed in the Bible is that they are in the Bible exactly because they were written extremely early, and this process had not happened to them. But there is a lot of gospels, like collectively called the Gnostic Gospels, in which that does happen. Like things get very fantastical. And in one of them, which is why I brought that up, there's this idea that Judas was like the second in command of the whole thing because he was the villain. Like he was the one that loved Jesus so much that took the role of the guy that had to do this because somebody had to do this. And he's like today in heaven and enjoying everything, which I find absurd, but it is the villain story.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like faith has been a huge part of this my current career arc, which really started back in 2020 when I was working as a consultant, and I was building a lot of JavaScript apps and really missing the Ruby on Rails experience.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm always dunk on the JavaScript people.
Yeah. So I was really missing the Ruby on Rails experience, and had this idea to create what became Blitz.js. And the idea was to make a Ruby on Rails for JavaScript built on top of Next.js. And it was like I was going to launch this thing, announce it, and I knew that it was going to be really big. Like I just knew deep down, like this was going to be very impactful for my career. I tweet, I launch it, it kind of goes semi-viral, like super positive response. And so I went on a walk that afternoon. I was just talking with the Lord, and like so I could just tell like this was going to be, a big thing. And I asked him for $1 million to get started. And the Blitz I spent on that, let's see, a month, year and a half, almost 2 years. And then I started working on Flightcontrol. And so the Flightcontrol, so let me tell the story of how I found my co-founder, which is really crazy. So, and then there's more to cover here. I wanted a co-founder, but also I view being a co-founder as like a marriage. And so I would want to be married to a Christian because it's a core belief. It's a core value. Like you need to be matched there. Otherwise you're going to set yourself up for trouble. And so I really cared about having a co-founder that was, Christian in that, like, we were aligned there. And so it was one day I was deciding around a couple ideas, and I decided, okay, this deploy to AWS thing, I'm going to do it. The very next day, my co-founder Mina DMs me on Twitter out of the blue. Like, we knew that each other existed, but we had not had any conversations or really anything. He DMs me out of the blue and says, hey, I'm thinking about building this deploy to AWS thing. Do you want to partner on it? And I'm like, what? Like, you're literally telling me, like, this is crazy. Like, how can this be possible? But I was like, I don't know who this guy is. Is he a believer? Like, I don't know. And so I was like, well, let's talk. And turns out we are super aligned on all core values. And like, now he's a best friend. Like, it's like the most dream scenario. And so that set us up to really have faith as a foundation of this company. And this was in April when we incorporated, and then we were doing fundraising and stuff, and we ended up raising $1 million. That $1 million I asked for in the fall. But during that time, we were spending a lot of time in prayer about the company. Like, we would meet weekly, him and I, and just praying about the company, about what is God wanting to do here. And I have so many visions that God showed me, like through my imagination, like we talked about from that time, about like how big Flightcontrol is going to be, like all these things that were like super inspiring. And so that has really has made it so much easier for us going through all the difficulties of the startup, because we have this foundation of like, this is something that God gave us. He has shown us, like, he is with us. He's going to provide for us. And there's been some super hard times, super faith testing times. But it has been a super fun journey because,
man, this is inspiring.
For so many reasons. Yeah. So
Thank you for sharing that. Like, do you expect that out of your employees as well, or do you think that as long as you and your co-founder are aligned?
Yep. So him
but
and
your employees would know this all about you, because a lot of people feel uncomfortable, right? People feel uncomfortable with Christianity, which is
so we don't like talk about it in meetings, in company meetings, or like even interviewing and stuff. Like, it's something you'll find out about us. I mean, it's on my Twitter bio. Like, it's just a huge part of who I am, and it really drives like my values and interactions with other people. But there's no requirement for your faith or anything about working with us. And even to this day, like Mina and I, like we have a one-on-one twice a week, and we end every one-on-one with prayer. Like, we drive this company in prayer. And like every day I wake up, I'm asking God, like, what is the thing I need to focus on today? Sometimes it's obvious. I know what it is. Other times it's not so obvious. And he like gives me something that I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's actually better than what I was going to do. So there's had very real effects on like what I work on a day-to-day basis and so forth.
Man, founding a company is like a marriage, and I can't wait to have a divorce. I don't know if you, I'll clip this for YouTube, but the story there is that I know my co-founder for 15 years. We worked together in the Linux kernel. Then we were employee number 3 and 4 at a database company. And now we founded the company together. But we have this Twitter persona that we wear, in which we hate each other. So like every opportunity we take it. So it's a very different relationship. And obviously, as I said, when I met this guy, I was a complete degenerate, right? And in fact, again, I prefacing that this is a joke for the people in the audience. But now that I am a Christian, I keep telling Pekka is my co-founder. He's a committed atheist. Although the other day I was trying to convert him, which I usually don't. But we were just having lunch together, and I forget whatever. And it just have you looked into this thing? But I was telling him, in fact, Pekka, I actually don't want to become a Christian, because I've been trying to get rid of you for all my life, and I can't. And at least after we die, we're going to different places, right? But like I my experience with that is, again, I don't have a lot of, as I already mentioned, a lot of like experientialism in which I see things, and it could be a physical deficiency that I have, it might be, or both. But I do see the handiwork of God, and I came to see this in coincidences like the one you mentioned, and like in things coming together. And it's again about the 99% and the 1%, because obviously coincidences happen, but there are some things that happen that the odds are so incredibly low, and things come together at the right time, and it's not one thing, it's 5-6 different things, and etc. Yep. And those things, I believe that, this is God's work. I mean, I wish he would talk to me more directly. Maybe he does, and I just don't listen, which, because I don't have the equipment to listen, or whatever. But I do see his work, and I saw his work both in me coming to live where I am today. So in 2020, when COVID started, I was living in Toronto, and in March of 2020, in the very beginning of this whole thing, I took this leap of faith, and I moved to a very small town 2.5 hours away from Toronto, west of Toronto, which was a completely crazy thing. But like a couple of things that happened that made me say, okay, this is not a coincidence. In the first day of first week of 2020, I sold everything I had. And the reason for that is that I was planning to move to the US. And in fact, I was applying for a green card, and I had it approved. And so my accountant said, you should sell everything you can, because it will make your move simpler. So you don't have to be transferring property, you just transfer cash. So I sold everything I had. And then like other things happened. I was thinking, like, I wanted to move to a smaller city for the longest time. And I was disgruntled to be in the big city, because I wanted to raise a bigger family. And in Toronto, it was like a really hard. So I was trying to move to the US for a long time. And then COVID started. And initially, the first thing that happened is that everybody lost like 30% of their wealth overnight. And I did not. And then house prices initially went down. After a while, they went back up, but like initially they went down. And like we found this one house in the city. Again, we were not living in the city, but looking into like the websites, we found this one house in the city that the owners were very old, and they were willing to take like a 15% cut to sell the house sooner if we were to give a big down payment or so. And I said, all of those things coming together. And I was like, it's hard to believe that all of this string of coincidences is all like everything I did about this thing was right. Like, I mean, 5-6 things that had to happen, and they all happen at the specific way that had to. So look, it's hard for me today to say this isn't God's work. And the same thing with Thurso. I believe that God wanted me to found this company through those series of coincidences. But the thing is, maybe I'm addicted to suffering. I think some people, my wife says that about me all the time. I don't know if that means that this company will succeed.
Yes,
but I also don't care. That's the thing. I came to believe is like God wanted me to found this company for some reason. Look, if the reason is that founding this company after the 5th year will take me on a trip to this place where I'm going to meet this person, and this person will. Something will happen in the life of that person, and that's what matters. That's fine. Let's do it. But it's very clear that this is God's will.
Yeah. So I have a similar feeling there. Like, I've seen all these visions and things, and like I think that this is going to be a really massive, successful company. But like maybe I'm misinterpreting things wrong. Like whatever. Mm-hmm. I think the journey is super important, and I am very intentional to enjoy the journey, to be fully surrendered in everything that I do. Like every day I'm like, God, I surrender myself, all I have, my company, like whatever, like I'm fully surrendered all the time. And that brings the most freedom and joy for me, because I'm no longer attached to outcomes. Like I've already decided the outcome. I've already given up everything. And so like anything, like every day that I get running this company is like a gift, you know? And if it shuts down tomorrow, okay, fine. I know that God has something better for me. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you tell apart? Because one of the things that you mentioned is exactly like, maybe I'm misinterpreting this, right? Just how do you tell those things apart? Like the things that I know should be true, the things that maybe I don't know. Where how do you stand on that?
I think when it comes to spirituality and hearing God, seeing things, seeing visions, I think you always have to have, I mean, it really applies to everything in life. Have humility and know that we're human, that we're not perfect. And like even in the spiritual realm, like God has made us perfect, like I mentioned earlier, but in the natural realm, like we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to do something risky or like irreversible or something with very big consequences on just like a whim of like, oh, God told me this. If it's something big of consequences, like I'm going to go to my trusted people that of faith around me that know me of, you know, and so like I'm going to get other people's input. I'm going to like keep testing it. And so it kind of depends on that level of like, it's not cut and dried. It's kind of a process of holding it lightly. Like I think this, of building conviction. And at some point, yeah, there probably is a leap of faith, but you have like other people's advice. You have all these multiple kind of experiences or whatever. Is like, yeah, I think that this is the right thing and I'm going to go for it. But even then it still not be right. Like there's been decisions, you know, I've made in life where it's like, I think that I was hearing God correctly there. I think I was doing the right thing. Looking back, the consequences are like, maybe that wasn't the right thing. I don't know. But I think you have to be okay with some of this mystery of not knowing exactly, you know, this or that.
Yeah. Were they not the right thing? Because why would you say that? Because they didn't benefit you, or because
yeah, like didn't... maybe and naturally of it seeming like this was maybe a bad thing, you know, but maybe it ultimately led to a better thing. Like it's hard to, I think, you know, and this is where like, you know, scripture says like God's ways are higher than our ways. And so sometimes there's things that, it's hard we don't see the full picture.
No, absolutely. Again, I actually don't see any picture because I have aphantasia. But you're picking on me on that one, Brandon. So I bring the guy on the podcast and he starts bullying me. So imagine that. Just, but look, it's refreshing to know that even the people who see pictures don't see the full picture. So absolutely, this is the case. Awesome. Look, man, it's been a tremendous pleasure having you around. Is there anything else that you think we didn't cover today that you would like my audience to know, or myself? Or
I just want to talk a little bit about how good Yahweh is. And Yahweh is the name of God, the Hebrew name of God, and so I like to use that more often than God. Just this extra clear. Yahweh is so good. Like that has been my journey of like learning more and more about how good God is. And I think, you know, it can be a challenge for some people of like the problem of evil and whatnot. And God is like so good. So if you have doubts, you know, if you're watching this and you have doubts about God, like give him a chance to show you his goodness, how good, how much he loves you, how much he cares for you. Like it has totally wrecked me. And you mentioned you were asking about the spirituality and the journey there. And and I talked about the fear of like just kind of trying things. So I think the last piece of that that I've experienced is dealing with your own childhood trauma. I think and becoming like an emotional maturity is like a really big part of experiencing God as a father. And so in the past 6 months, I've done a lot of like processing childhood trauma of things that like my parents didn't give me that I should have experienced, and
Is
vice
this
versa.
something, I'm not going to force you, but is this something you're comfortable sharing? Or if you
So,
want to
I
keep
mean,
it at
there's
high level, that's fine too. But like,
like, I think the specifics are not important. I think we
okay.
all have had
Yeah.
adverse childhood experiences. Um, and I think it's really important. I think even if you have perfect parents, like you're still going to have some level of trauma because of just
Yeah.
things that were good for you that you didn't like at the time, you know? So I
That's
think that,
true, but a lot of people, although it is true, and I agree with you, everybody has something. Lots of people look into their childhood with nostalgia and longing, and at the very least, there were simpler times. And my childhood was a part of my French a shit show. And it's one of the things that I shared last week with the Primogen. I made my first friend at age 13, right? And it's not that people around me were neutral about me, is that they very, very, very actively disliked me. That changed at age 13, and I've got a lot of childhood trauma to unpack, and maybe this is part of what I need to do. I don't know.
so, so yeah, I
Yeah.
think that, if you don't have if you don't think you do, I would encourage you to think again. Um, you know, and so, and the reason is because whenever you have traumatic experiences, and then usually as a kid, you don't know how to process them. And so you lock them up. And so there's a part of you that like almost dies or becomes dormant that you lock away. And so whenever you have that, like today, if you have unprocessed trauma from the past, you are not whole. There's a part of you that is dormant, that is not alive. Um, and when it comes to childhood trauma specifically, a lot of that is related to your primary caregivers. Like, at least I think in a lot of cases, for me it was.
Yeah.
And so God is our primary caregiver now. And so it's easy to make the connection of like, if I have these traumatic experiences with my parents that I have not processed, then it makes it hard for me to connect with God in the fullness way that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And so this past season for me has been processing those things. And it has really unlocked a new level of intimacy with God for me, of being
How do
my
you how do
father.
you process it? Is it a process of like praying, introspection, or action?
All of the above. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's personal, like whatever you need,
Yeah.
talking to a
Mm-hmm.
therapist. For me, it was not any, so the book Unwanted that I read, is a really good one. Um, there's another book called um, Be Adult Children of Emotionally Unhealthy Parents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so those things, and then just processing more like introspection for me, and prayer, also got, yeah, it really helped. So it's been a process of understanding what good parents should be. And like God has really helped
Mm-hmm.
show me that. Um, and and I've also seen that in the books and things I've read of like, oh, like that's what a parent or a child should experience. That's what a parent should be to a child. I had no idea. It's like totally inconceivable for me from what I experienced. And so
Mm-hmm.
that, just seeing the things of what makes an actually good, emotionally healthy parent, immediately I can transpose that to God and realize, oh wow, like, and so it's just given me a lot more sort of confidence and trust, um, in Him, that He's got me. I don't have to worry about things on my own. Like He's literally going to take care of me. I don't have to worry about Him leaving me or whatever else that I might be concerned about.
Yeah, no, I think it's no accident that the metaphor that we always use for God is the Father, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just a, and again, you mentioned that you don't have kids, and I have three kids now. You said I have my first son that was born Benjamin, and then I have two daughters, Emma and Rebecca. Maybe one day in 10 years, they're going to be scrolling on YouTube and they're going to find this. I think it's wild to think about that. But yeah, man, like the thing about kids, is that if God hasn't made, this is something that people say a lot, like God made kids cute because otherwise we will kill them. Parenting is really, really, really hard because a lot of
Yep.
people who don't have kids, they have this idea. And I want to connect this to what you said earlier about like, yeah, I can be cutthroat because that's the game I'm supposed to play. And I think people who don't have kids sometimes have this illusion that all you need to do is hug them and show your love and show your affection and say, good luck, buddy. Good luck trying to raise your kids like that. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in a sense, you're doing a disservice. And because they need to learn a couple of things and they don't have the language developed yet to learn those things. So sometimes parenting is this very direct love. Sometimes parenting is harsh. And I think understanding that tells us a lot about the nature of God, because God sometimes is very harsh. And there is this division, like the Old Testament and the New Testament. One of them focus on the person of the Father, and one of them focus on the person of the Son. And the God of the New Testament, right, as is depicted in the New Testament, can be quite harsh. But being a father or understanding what a father should do, I think it does help you understand that, hey, look, God is in a sense parenting us. And and then you look at your kid from the point of view of a grown up, and like, that what they're doing is wrong. That you need to correct them, and you know that not correcting them has consequences that you don't want them to face, right? Yep. So you have to play the role of a stern father. Sometimes it's a role that you play, right?
Yep, totally. So yeah, like that, I think wholeness is like a huge thing. Emotional wholeness helps you with your faith. So yeah, this is a great journey of wholeness, freedom, joy. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Do you intend to have a family, kids as well? And is this in your purview?
So I was married for 7 years, and I have a conviction that I cannot marry anyone else, because Jesus said, if you are divorced and marry another woman, you're committing adultery.
Yes.
And so I don't know. I think, I don't know what the future holds.
This is, by the way, one of the things that changed about me. If my wife were to die, which I obviously hope she doesn't, well, not soon enough. One day she will. Maybe only Brian Johnson will not die. You know about Brian Johnson, or you got the joke, or like no. Brian Johnson is the guy who's trying to live forever, like the tech guy who's trying to live forever. So which maybe, who knows, maybe. But except for Brian Johnson, we're all going to die for sure. So one day my wife will die, and I hope it takes a long time. But if God so wants that it happens sooner, there is no way that I will ever marry again. And this is the reason. And I think that, like, especially in our society, I think it's very normal. Like, just you get a divorce, and like I came to see marriage in a very different way as well. Again, and I was already married because I got married super early. And it's funny that my wife was also not. We're both Catholics today, but like she was not anything. She was raised in a very different environment. And we again, I'm not inside her head, so I don't know exactly her internal state, but she's Catholic enough, I would say. And again, you have this thing in this culture that this is just normal. I mean, people divorce, people die, and then like just marry again. You're young, etc. Like there is absolutely no way. There is absolutely no way that I would marry today again. And I think part of that was also coming to this realization, the thing we were talking about earlier. I used to think that those things, that lust and desire and which again, to me as a married man today, I'm okay with having them because I have my wife. But I used to think that having this desire was something that you just can't do anything about it. So you either act on it, or you're making it worse, or you're repressed, or things like that. Now, I don't believe that anymore. So if one day I don't have that, it's okay.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Brendan, it was a tremendous pleasure having you on the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed the experience as well. I had a great chat with you, man. And in a sense, I think I learned a lot from you, and which is great. So thank you. In another sense, you set a very high bar for a lot of things. So I kind of hate you a little bit because of that. I don't really. But look, thanks for coming. I had a blast, and I see you around.
All right. Thank you.